Welcome to Early Care Connection. I'm Izzy Greenberg. Today we have our usual panel of experts, Meryl Gay from the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance and Ava Bermuda Zimmerman from the Child Care for Connecticut's Future campaign. We are also joined by Commissioner Beth Bai from the Office of Early Childhood and a number of her staff members who will get introduced sort of in the course of this in participation. And they're here to do a blue ribbon panel listening session. So just like they have been doing. So we will actually just turn it right over to them. We'll get right into it. And a reminder to everyone that if you are interested in speaking to the community, you can use the chat. It's also great for technical difficulties, but if you have questions for the commissioner or any of our panelists, please put those questions into the Q&A. And if you don't mind waiting until the presentation's over to see if your questions are answered, that does help us to not clog up the Q&A. Sometimes we can get 75 or 100 questions in here, and a reminder to please use that upvote. So I will use the questions first that have the most upvotes, because I assume that those are ones that multiple people are interested in hearing the answer to. So I know whenever we have the commissioner on, we always get more questions than at any other time, which is fantastic. Welcome, Commissioner. Thank you so much for being here. I am going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Izzy, and to the whole Early Connections team for making this possible. It saves us doing another Zoom meeting, and people are used to setting aside time at this time to learn about what's happening and learn how to be advocates for families and children. I hope everybody had a nice weekend. I know I was just blown away at the Meriden Public Library with a cabinet parent ambassador meeting, so many families out. And the last question one of the parents asked me is, how can I make a difference? She's a new parent ambassador and wants to know how to make a difference. So I think we have more people than ever engaged in early childhood issues, understanding that it takes a push to make a difference. And I think Connecticut is sort of on the brink of really some important systemic changes that we want to, bring to your attention here. Many of you have participated in the Blue Ribbon Panel listening sessions. We heard from thousands of providers and parents. We also heard from business and, had a real 360. But as we were having one of our leadership meetings, we realized we really missed the part of the Blue Ribbon Panel process that brought us out into the field, because we didn't just hear about the Blue Ribbon Panel, but we'd hear about other things that OEC could be doing better. We could answer questions for people, and we really want to institutionalize listening sessions as a part of our culture at the Office of Early Childhood. So we thank you for participating. We had a session in New Haven about 2 weeks ago. Probably had 35 folks there, community members, public schools, childcare providers, parents. And that was great. There were a lot of questions about House Bill 5051 and process and timing. And then we had another meeting in Stamford the next week where a lot of the questions were different. They were around family group home regulations and the need to update those and help make family childcare more sustainable. And there were a lot of questions about Care for Kids there that we were able to answer, and even some problems in the Care for Kids system that we were able to resolve that week and going forward for other families. So that's where you bringing your questions to us makes us better and more responsive and helps fix the system little by little. As a former director, I know the system has strengths and the system has weaknesses, and we're hoping that the Blue Ribbon Panel plan and efforts will help. And that's why we want to keep listening, because it's not, we always said this isn't a static document. It's going to change. And right now we're in a legislative session. So I think Meryl and Ava and Izzy could all tell you that things are changing by the minute up there. And then we have to be ready to adapt and change and make sure we leverage what comes out of the legislature and from the governor as best we can. So I'm going to walk you through the same PowerPoint we did in Stamford and New Haven in person, and we'll continue to do a combo of in-person and online. Those were both in the evening. This one's during the day, trying to to balance different needs. So I'm going to ask Eloisa to start the slideshow, and then the goal is to have about 35 to 40 minutes of questions. So Eloisa, do you want to just hit play so it doesn't show them, so it's just bigger? Okay, great. Thanks so much, Eloisa. Eloisa Melendez is a leader at OEC who helps us with Blue Ribbon Panel, the cabinet, external stakeholders meetings. So she's really been helping us think through this systemic change and making sure that others have a voice. So just a reminder, and I know I've been on this call about this before, about the 4 core goals of the Blue Ribbon Panel. Improving, expanding our workforce, making sure they're equitable wages and improving the quality, working to make sure families have access to care and that access is equitable, improving our systems so they're not so clunky and complex and they're easier for families to navigate and for providers to administer. And then finally, we know we need a sustained funding. We need sustained funding for the long term to really be able to make our system work and make the 3 prior goals above come to fruition. Next slide. So Early Start Connecticut is the bill, House Bill 5051, that is looking to make the state-funded early childhood system more streamlined, easier for reporting, less complex, reduce some of the regulations, make the programs more apparent for families. Like families don't know what's a state-funded system and what isn't, and we're not doing a good enough job letting them know. So to help them find affordable childcare.
Commissioner,
And then
I'm just going to interrupt to request that you slow down a pinch.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Complicated information for our translator.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So we want to also make sure that community needs are centered in our early childhood system and that families have a voice. So overall, this is what we're trying to do with House Bill 5051, straight out of the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations. Next slide. So what do we mean when we say streamline the system? One is that we heard loud and clear during the Blue Ribbon Panel process that we need to simplify the staff requirements, make a 3-step career ladder versus a complicated sort of registry right now that to make it to what is a certified teacher. Since we passed this, there are also some changes in the State Department of Education certification that will impact a qualified staff member as well, that I can go into if we have time. We also want to be clear about what our quality requirements are. And for now, they are NAEYC accreditation, NAFCC, that's Family Child Care accreditation, or Head Start approval. So just be really clear about that. And also work to make the parent copays equitable across the whole system. And we've had really good success with the Head Start enhancement funds. So to make sure we not plop those funds into the early childhood line item, but maintain them as their own line item to make sure that Head Start programs receive those funds. Next. I think for those of you who are on the call who are state-funded providers, this is more for you than if you are a private provider and you don't receive any state funding. But during COVID, we paid by classroom and found that helped programs stabilize, better to break even when they were getting paid by classroom versus by child. So we're asking for that. We also want to have OEC have contracts directly with the providers, so it doesn't go through a third party. For most programs for family childcare we will still have an intermediary, We're grateful to Circle and the city of Hartford for sort of doing that for us at this time to finally bring family childcare into our state funded system. We know we want more family childcare in our state funded system, so we're going to have to work out an intermediate process there. But mostly OEC will be paying center-based programs directly versus going through a city. Make sure we prioritize the existing programs in any RFA or RFP process because of decades of investments in those programs, and then make the application and reporting requirements simpler. Next slide. The other piece is, how do we make sure family and community needs are met? First of all, make access easier. The bill eliminates the family work requirements that used to be in place for state-funded programs, which can be challenging because families can't get a job if they don't have childcare, and they can't get childcare unless they have a job. It creates difficulty for the families. And there are also families in Connecticut, in some of our cities who can't produce the paperwork in terms of working. So that's another thing that helps. We also are going to maintain a mix of income for families where we'll require that 60% of children are from families that are making below 75% of the state median income. And then I think one of the things we really need to work out is the local governance partners. And we heard loud and clear when we suggested a regional structure that people really like their local community plans and their local community school readiness councils. So we're sticking with that model, but we still believe many need assistance and guidance. And so we've built in technical assistance for them. And then another change is every community will work on a needs assessment that OEC will work with them on to figure out what are the childcare needs in communities from a diverse standpoint. Next slide. Okay, so here's a legislative update related to the Blue Ribbon Panel Plan. The governor had proposed that Care for Kids increase eligibility from families at 50% of the state median income up to 65% of the state median income. He also proposed a tri-share program in Eastern Connecticut for families to make childcare more affordable for families and also bring more full pay families, if you will, fully paid for slots into the system in Eastern Connecticut. And then the governor proposed expanding the family childcare incubator program. He said to New London County, but since there's been a bill to, expand it statewide up to 20 incubators, okayed by OEC. So that's changed. Of these three things, because the governor's budget, the legislature has said, we're not passing the governor's budget. We are not doing a budget. We're going to stick with what we had last year. There's more to come on the next slide, but what this means for Care for Kids expansion is there's no additional funding for that. Oh, here, it's all laid out in front of you. Thanks so much. The governor had proposed $12.9 million to get to 65% of SMI. So that's not in the budget. Everything on the top of this slide, the first 5 items were in the governor's general fund appropriation. So the Care for Kids, health insurance navigators for childcare providers, to continue Smart Start for the ARPA funded Smart Start classrooms, to move to the single funding stream that I talked about earlier, and then to fund Sparkler, which has been a really successful developmental screening tool. So none of those items are currently in any budget, and we do not know what the House and Senate are going to come out with. They have about $300 million, Meryl, is that what they're saying? A little more? You're muted, Meryl, sorry.
I keep hearing 200 to 300.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 200 to 300 million. There's a chance that some of that 20 million that you see will be in there. And then everything below the line are things that the governor proposed using American Rescue Plan dollars for. One is grants to childcare programs across the state, public and private, state funded, non-state funded, for stabilization. The second was these were funding for coaches in programs, because we heard a lot from childcare directors that they really needed help with supporting their teachers with coaches. So these were going to be grants to programs for coaches. And then the Tri-Share program, which I talked about earlier, had 1.8 million. So you can see that the governor proposed $43.3 million on top of the increase of $50 million into his budget. It's not clear at this time to us what will be funded. And, you know, you can ask your legislator about this. And certainly the governor still has these priorities. But at this point, a lot of the power for these decisions is with the legislature. So they are working it out. I think they're talking cross-party and cross-chamber. So Republicans and Democrats are talking together, and House and Senate is talking together to get to that how should we spend that $300 million? So we won't know this until that happens. Next slide. Okay, so this was updated today. Kristen, thank you so much for getting us the new numbers. So currently we have 21,000 families on care for 21,000 children on care for kids and 15,000 families. We have 1,500 families on the wait list. Right now, there is about a 7-week wait for working families because certain other children go in immediately. Anybody who has a child on TANF, temporary assistance to needy families, DCF involved families, and what's the other priority one group, Kristen? Teen parents, that goes in right away.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so those are the three. And so the wait time is much longer for folks in higher ed and GED programs because the working families go first based on the prioritization. So start to finish, those are 6 months for people in higher ed and GED programs right now. Care for Kids is working on applications received April 11th. And redetermination set to expire April 30th. So that's pretty close. And then working on documents from folks back to April 4th. So there's been some improvement I see there, Kristen, in the processing times, but the issue is the wait list then slows things down. And the current budget that passed, that is in place for this year, we are funded based on 18,500 children in the system starting in July. So that's part of how the wait list slows down. If there's not enough money to pay for everybody, then you can't take someone new in every time someone comes off, because you have to actually get the number of, we need to get the number of children down to 18,500 based on the budget. Now that could change. And we did get some federal money, an additional $6 million, thanks to Rosa DeLauro. And I know you all have heard from Rosa on this call. So that will help some, but you can see that, you know, there's a high need out there and we're not going to be able to meet the whole need. Next slide. This is just a quick update about our Elevate system to say that it is now completely tied to our 211 system. So if you search for a program on 211, you will see if the program is a member plus, or a member accredited. And OEC is still giving out bonuses for programs that reach the member plus. That is, they have a quality improvement plan approved, and that plan is moving them toward accreditation, and that's for all programs, not just state-funded programs. But what our system is trying to say is, if you're a member, you are licensed, you meet health and safety goals, that's good. If you are a member plus, you are licensed, and you have a quality improvement plan. And if you're member accredited, you're reaching the highest standard in the Connecticut Quality Improvement System. I think that's the last slide, right, Eloisa? Oh, and this is something that we learned at the listening sessions, actually. We want everyone to be aware that you have a service navigator in your region that is there to help do an assessment of your program, help you get to Member Plus or Member Accredited, direct you to resources and professional development to help you. And these are the contact information for the different regions. One thing we learned in the first 2 listening sessions is there were a lot of people that didn't know there were service navigators out to help them navigate to the kind of supports they need for quality improvement. So you can let me know about that. Next slide. And then we just wanted to make you aware of the kinds of professional development resources that are available through OEC. And so this slide, will make this available to you, Izzy, and people can go on the link and figure out what's available. Next slide. And then wanted also to be sure that everybody knows about the qualified workforce incentives, where we're, this is again for folks throughout the state, giving monetary benefits to people that reach the early childhood qualified teacher with a BA or an AA. And I believe for a CDA. So this is on our website, and we're going to continue to do this. So if somebody is on their path to get an AA, but they don't have it yet, when they finish it, they can apply to this program and get a bonus. Same with BA. If someone finishes their BA in June, they can apply and get the bonus. If someone moves from an AA to a BA, they get the bonus. We plan to make this a permanent part of our system as a way to recognize people who've achieved early childhood credentials in the field. And again, some of this will shift if the SDE changes its requirements for certification in elementary and preschool. Next slide. And this just shows you the award amounts. We thought that these listening sessions were a chance for us to make people aware of this, because though we have had a lot of applicants, I think we've given out on the order of $4 or $5 million. There's still folks out there who haven't applied. So you can go to the OEC website. If someone from the agency can put that website in the chat, that would be great. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. That's it. So those are our summaries of Early Start. We've mentioned Elevate and qualified workforce incentives. So my guess is a Q&A is filling up. Meryl or Ava or Izzy, who's moderating?
I'm going to moderate. Ava, you have your hand up though. I'll call on you first. I'll moderate, but I know Meryl and Ava are going to help me to comb through the Q&A so we don't get overwhelmed.
So my first question to kick off here is last few slides about money and compensation that's connected to education. Just a point of clarity, because I already know the answer, is does this go to every provider, and how does it work when it comes to home base versus center base?
It goes to home and center equitably. I mean, if you have the degree, you have the degree. CDA, AA, BA, it doesn't matter if you're family or center. You have to be a licensed provider or license exempt. I think it's just licensed. Can you go back to that? Because we also have some programs that are license exempt, but they get an inspection every year as part of Care for Kids. So, Eloisa, can you just go to that slide? I just want to be really clear about the license status. And maybe Maggie, go back.
That load? Can't see it.
Not showing, just black.
Okay.
I think if you go back, I think you just try one more time.
I don't know what's...
Maggie, were you going to weigh in? You just came off.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
I just verifying that it's licensed programs. They have to work in a licensed program, or do license exempt who have inspections? Are they included?
I believe it's licensed programs.
Okay.
Should I still pull up the side or?
So Eloisa, you can just scan that slide, and if it's something different, if the slide says something different, just interrupt. Okay, next question.
All right, Ava, did you have another question?
There's
Guess
a
not.
provider that is, I guess, if I can call on a provider that's connected to the question I just asked about the money. If we can put Norma Stennett audio on.
Sure, just one second. Okay, Norma, you should be available to talk.
Hi, Norma.
Good good morning, Commissioner. Thank you for being here. How are
Sure.
you today?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm happy to let you know I've completed my bachelor's in child studies at Post, and I'm scheduled to graduate on the 11th of May. So I need to know, how will I be compensated for the degree? Because no one at the register seemed to know, and no one at Care for Kids seemed to know. And I've uploaded all my documents to the registry since March, and no one seems to know the process. I
Oh,
finished school in December
Yeah,
and got the official diploma in March, uploaded
Yeah.
the transcript and the diploma, and no one seems to know the process for compensation.
well, Norma, they should. I know we've been handling a lot of phone calls, so let me do this. If you send me an email, I will get someone at OEC to get in touch with you. I'm sorry
Okay,
about that. March is a long time. You're welcome.
Okay,
Didn't have to wait a
thank
month.
you.
Congratulations, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Norma. There's a lot of love flowing up on my screen for you. Congratulations are in order. Okay, was that
Lucky
it?
kid.
Good. Okay, I'm going to pass it on to Meryl. Go ahead, Meryl.
Okay, so there was a similar question from Tashiana saying, what about those who already had their AA or BA in another major but are a provider? So that's
Hold on one sec, because I just had a note that QWI is for centers, not family childcare. So I'm so sorry. I thought,
Commissioner, that is correct.
yeah, so I got that wrong. So it is for centers. But let us look into that and look at our resources and look at our policies there.
All right, thank you. Meryl?
so you have a bunch of other questions here. One was a question about whether before and after school programs count for any of this stuff. If they're a licensed provider, would they?
I'm afraid to speak again because I was so sure it was family childcare too. So I'll ask my team somebody on the team get a definite answer on that, and then raise your hand and we'll get to you. Okay. If so, Maggie or Eloisa can ask.
We will get an answer.
Great.
And Commissioner, I think that might be more vague across everything that you just presented, because that's a question that came in more towards the beginning. So I think they're asking if before and after school
Yeah.
programs would be entitled
Yeah.
to any of the information presented, or if it's just state funded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the QWI is statewide, so it's not just state funded, but in my head, I'm remembering part of the challenge with the family childcare is that because they're in a union and we provide a contracted bonus for degrees, that this is outside of the contract. So I think part of this is because we have a contract with them, and that is why it gets really complicated when you try to do some of these programs. But we are going to look into that because we do want to be as equitable as we can be.
Meryl, were you able to finish the question that Tashiana had started about people who have associate's degrees and other bachelor's degree? There's a few different questions in here about
I think that's a moot point because Tashiana is a family childcare provider.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay, understood.
Yeah, because built into the contract are bonuses for degrees.
Yep.
I believe. So I think that's why it gets tricky.
So,
There was a follow-up though, people who have an associate's degree in early childhood and a bachelor's in early childhood and elementary ed, I guess. Are you available for the bonus? Do you get it? I guess you get it for one of those, but not the other, for the
Get
highest
it
one?
for your highest early childhood degree. That's why I said this might change if the certification changes to pre-K to 3, but right now it's elementary certification is different than pre-K to 3 certification.
Yes.
So that way, if you had your associates in early childhood, that would be your highest early childhood degree, I believe.
And then Eloisa, yeah, go ahead, Meryl.
Kathy Vanicky asked, slide stated OEC pay upfront and quarterly by child or classroom. Please explain that a little bit more.
You cut out, Meryl. What did you say?
So
Kathy Vanicky?
the question was about paying upfront
Yeah.
quarterly, and it says by child or classroom. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yes. So what we're moving toward is a system where we pay upfront for each quarter. At the end of that quarter, the program will invoice us for what is their enrollment now, and then we will project what the next quarter will be based on that, and then pay them at the beginning of the quarter for the next quarter, and then the same thing will happen. With, if this all passes, the plan is to pay the first quarter in full, so the programs have the funds they need to hire teachers. Again, you can't get kids without teachers, and you can't get teachers if you don't have kids paying tuition. So the idea is a state-funded system would move to pay the first quarter up front, and then the last 3 quarters pay based on enrollment. The enrollment can be by classroom or by child. So if you have 15, 18 children and you call that a classroom, we will pay by classroom as long as it's 80 to 85% full. We're working on the numbers. And we'll pay by classroom. So that way, when you lose a kid for a month, you're not up and down. If programs do not have enough kids for classrooms, we'll pay by child. And the rate for preschool is slated to go up to $10,500 per child starting July 1st. So we'd pay by child. Otherwise, we'd pay by classroom based on the per child basis, but we won't count each child. If you have a child, if you're not full, if the classroom isn't totally full, you could still get your full reimbursement. So that's how it's, and we were saying a classroom is 18, but we've since shifted because there's some rooms only big enough for 15 or 12. So we're going to work with programs to define what a classroom is for them and pay by classroom as long as it's nearly full, 80 to 85% full. Otherwise, we'll pay by child.
Okay. We're getting a ton of questions here, and I'm just trying to go through which ones are duplicate.
So can I also just ask that if you are on here as a panelist from OEC, if you can go into the Q&A, I think there's a lot of questions in here about the nuance of who gets the bonus and for what. And I think some of that could be answered in writing. So if you guys could go in and just type the answers in, we could clear out some of these, which would help us.
Yes, and also folks on the call could go to just write in qualified workforce incentives, OEC, and there's a frequently asked questions, there's a Q&A there, that should really guide you.
I put that in the chat. I put the link to that webpage into the chat.
Okay.
And Meryl and Izzy, can I clarify, is Deb Bliss and her team are coming on, is it next week to talk about the Elevate program? So I think a lot of these questions can be answered when they
What if we make it Elevate and QWI?
Yeah, it's going to be, well, I'm sure they're going to cover both. We'll make sure.
Yeah. All right. So let me, if we're going to focus those questions next week, let me just see if there are, okay, Care for Kids, please clarify, Care for Kids eligibility changes that parents no longer need to be working? No, it was the state-funded.
No, it's the state-funded programs. Yeah. Care for Kids, they need to be working or in a higher ed or adult ed or workforce training.
But with the changes that are in 5051, somebody could have a toddler trying to go back into the workforce could enroll their toddler in your state-funded CDC infant toddler slot and then go get the job.
Yes,
And qualify for care for kids.
yes,
Yeah. As opposed to now where you have to have the job in order to qualify for that CDC slot.
right.
Exactly.
Meryl, can you also be answer live dismissing the questions that you ask?
Yep.
So they confuse me if they're there.
Okay.
There is a question here, whether there's a specific area in Connecticut that has a higher need for care for kids. Are you looking at this geographically, or is the waiting list kind of statewide?
Well, the way Care for Kids works is the individuals that get on first are those with the highest need. So families, temporary assistance to needy families, teen parents, and families making below 60% of the state median income. So that it's more about the families and their income than about a region. We couldn't, by federal rules, say we need more care for kids in Northwestern Connecticut than Southeastern. It's about individual applications. Now, what we can do is make sure that providers in every region know that this is a way to help families pay for childcare. We could do better outreach through United Way to make sure families know, but we can't do it by region. It's very clear that there are childcare deserts all over the state, particularly in our big cities and in Eastern Connecticut. So like Bridgeport, Hartford, and Eastern Connecticut have the largest childcare deserts, if you will, but other cities like Danbury, Stamford, Waterbury, dealing with growing populations without growing childcare spaces, also have huge challenges because of the population growth. Part of the issue in Eastern Connecticut is there's not enough population to support the system. So that's why we're looking at things like TriShare in Eastern Connecticut to be something particular in Eastern Connecticut. And it's why we targeted our incubator effort there. But there are needs all over the state. I don't think there's one community that has enough infant toddler care in the whole state of Connecticut. So I think we have somewhere around 30% of the supply we need as a state. Preschool's closer to 100%, but there's still places that don't have enough preschool.
Yeah. I was actually just trying to look for that map that we had, Meryl, but I couldn't find it quickly. Did you identify the next question?
Let's just see.
And sorry for our delay. It does get really confusing when there's so many questions in here. I'm trying to find the ones that are the most relevant.
I'm happy for the questions because whether we get to them or not, they're going to inform us.
Well, somebody who's saying, I don't have audio, but I'm interested in the TriShare pilot in Eastern Connecticut. We have a long wait list of interested CDA and post-secondary ECE candidates from Roberta Travers. So I think that's the question about TriShare as a way to stimulate growth in the
Yeah, that's the hope, is that when there's more money for full pay spaces and all these new workers at Electric Boat and other Dominion and on the reservations, that there will be enough of a push and more funding for childcare. If the state brings 1.8 million and industry brings 1.8 million, that would be significant in Eastern Connecticut, almost $4 million, 3.6 million for childcare expansion. And then parents would bring a third of that, another million. So now you're at, more than $5 million in that region would be a huge help to grow supply of family child care and even maybe centers, because I know the programs that have looked at it to open a new center out there, they're concerned about just how will they have enough people in the supply of kids and families to meet their needs. So we think bringing those funds out there will be a big help.
So there's a question, can you please speak to the changes in pre-K certification? Is it pre-K?
Yeah. So what's proposed in a bill to start in, I think, July 1st, 2025, is that the elementary certification would go pre-K to 6. Right now, there's pre-K to 3 and 1 to 6, and there have been 20 years of back and forth on these certifications. But there was a certification committee that met. I was part of that. And this is a problem across preschool through high school. There's a shortage of teachers, and there are all these different subgroups of certification that makes it hard to hire teachers. And so the whole system is looking to reduce the number of subgroups. So the pre-K to 3, if you will, certification has been brought into the 1 to 6 certification. And the thinking is that basically right now superintendents can ask for a waiver to allow someone with 1 to 6 to teach preschool. And of every waiver that's been requested, every one has been granted. So you have teachers coming into the system who haven't been trained in early childhood. If you go to pre-K to 6, higher education will have to train all the elementary teachers in preschool and elementary. That'll be required by their certifying board that oversees their accreditation with the higher ed accreditation institution. So at least it won't be elementary teachers just getting a pass, and you won't have 5th grade teachers going into preschool with no experience at all. This has been a difficult one. I fought to keep pre-K to 3 for 2 decades, but it really was a losing game, and we do need to make the whole teacher certification system simpler. And I think bringing early childhood practice to all elementary teachers will make elementary schools better too, as well as help with the supply of early childhood educators. But the idea is also that if you have a 1 to 6 certification, you'll automatically be considered pre-K to 6, as that's part of the bill starting a year from July 1st.
George is wondering, how will the new funding from CCDBG used, and when will these funds enter the system?
Yes, the new funds should be available. We usually find out right around now, end of April, beginning of May, the funds come down. And they will be used for Care for Kids to expand the number of families that we serve. So that's the idea. We don't want to have a long waiting list. We don't want to be coming down. So those funds can help with some of that. The governor proposed 12.9 to meet the need. That would be half of it. Half of the 12.9 is there now in federal funds. It wasn't there when the budget started. So what we're trying to do is just keep Care for Kids as open as can be to not have the wait list get further backlogged than it is.
Meryl, did you have another one?
Yeah, and as you your responses to the questions of the Early Childhood Caucus last week about how the levers that OEC has to manage the size of the Care for Kids wait list. I think I had thought it would take much longer to adjust the number, but you've got roughly 1,000 kids coming up for Care for Kids, depending on which month, because there are 20,000 kids on the
Right.
program now. It's between 1,000 and 2,000 kids per month coming up for redetermination, and about
Yes.
a little bit more than half of those kids are typically redetermined. And then, so that means that as you sort of throttle how many kids you invite off the wait list each week, you can reduce the number of kids on the program so that, we're currently at 21,000. The goal, I mean, if the budget doesn't change at all, if there isn't some way to put some money into Care for Kids, then we're looking at a budgeted amount of 18,500, which would mean you'd need to come down substantially. But that could actually be done between now and then, or close to.
Yes.
So
It is more than you think that are coming up, and a lot of people don't even apply for redetermination, we find. That's the vast majority of the drop off, because we know families are not making more money and being bumped out as a rule. There were only 76 families last year that got bumped out because they made too much money. out of you can see 15,000 families. So most families still qualify. It's just that they don't apply. Their lives have changed. They might have moved. The kids are going to kindergarten. Who knows? And then we usually also have a drop off in the summer with the 4-year-olds who stop going to childcare. A lot of families cover the summer. So things change month by month.
Yeah.
But families try to eke out the summer without paying for childcare with family, et cetera. So some families come off then too.
So follow-up question from Georgia was, so does this mean these funds will be used to increase income eligibility?
No, the idea, well, I think certainly we're open to conversation about this, but we don't want to reduce access to care for kids. We'd love to keep it around 21,500. So the governor's 12.9 both got us to 65% and kept eligibility at it kept us at 21,500 children. Our goal is to first keep the 21,500 children. It's not to go to 65% as a first step. If we found we got more federal dollars or had a way to afford that, we would. To be honest, the bigger nut is the federal requirement that all parents pay 7% of their income and no more on their subsidy. And that costs about $5 million for the state of Connecticut. And that's sort of a requirement coming down from ACF. So that would probably also precede moving up to 65% of SMI for OEC.
And just to be clear for everyone, that would mean that if somebody is currently paying 10% of their income for care as a copay for Care for Kids, it's not that the provider is going to end up having less, it's that the state's going to pick up that 3% that parents are currently paying above the 7%.
Yeah, that's why it costs $5 million to do that. So,
okay.
So we'd love to go to 65%, but that's probably the third step. That's not first. We have to keep access, we have to keep affordability, and then we can move to expansion. But I'm not hopeful that that can happen in this fiscal year to get to 65% and maintain 21,000 families, children.
All right, Ava, your hand's up. Go ahead.
I just saw some questions about when does the compensation for Elevate start? I'm assuming the answer is it's already started, but there are about 3 questions there.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
already.
cool.
And next week, you'll hear much more about Elevate. And we're interested in your feedback, both on Elevate and also how we can make sure people access the service navigators.
Izzy, do you want me to keep going with some questions here?
If you had any more, go ahead. I have some that I'll
Yeah,
jump in with, and
I'll
Meryl probably does
grab it.
too. And I think we're wrapping this up at
Arnaldo.
10:30, right? That's
10:30, yep,
so
10 more
we have
minutes.
9 more minutes.
9 more minutes.
Arnaldo says they have a home-based program. Their mom is a licensed provider, so they're speaking on behalf of their mom, and they're a substitute. They want to know if they have, as a substitute, a master's degree in education as well as 5 teaching certifications with the state. Does he qualify for anything as a sub? Great question.
Well, that's a good question. That would depend on the union contract. I don't know, Ava, if you know those details. If the subs get
Sadly, no. Like, I know for many years, anyone who's out there who's a home-based provider who's part of the child care union, there's been a desire to start a substitute part of the union representation. And we've been getting pretty, the union, I am not we. The union has been getting pretty close to starting something for the last like 2 years. But the logistical, it's taking time. So Arnaldo or any other sub on this call, definitely contact the union and ask for a timeline of when representation would start.
Yeah, and again, that's why it is hard sometimes with compensation and family childcare providers. And a shout out to family childcare providers, because their organizing led to a 3-year contract with 11% increase a year in Care for Kids. And that led to an 11% increase in Care for Kids across the whole system. So all childcare centers, everybody benefits from those negotiations. There are so many positives, but one of the downsides is that OEC can't just say, oh, every accredited center is getting a 25% bonus on Care for Kids. We can't say that we have to negotiate that with the union when it comes to family childcare because of the contract. So it does get confusing.
All right, Meryl, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Okay, so there was a question about sort of the status of House Bill 5051 and a sort of associated question, when would OEC begin paying programs directly?
Yeah, that is a good question. The 5051 is sitting in the legislature. I'm really concerned about misspeaking here. We have a timeline on this. We tried to get permission. Well, the dates all changed in approps, but we have asked for the dates to go back. The goal would be that we see paying programs upfront and quarterly as a stabilization effort that we need now. So we asked in the bill for it to start in 2024, correct, Maggie?
Yes, and that's correct. And Commissioner,
But some of it got, some
pay
dates
by-
got pushed back.
but the pay by classroom did not actually in the
Okay,
approach.
so that
They
is
kept-
okay.
They kept it for starting July 1st, 2024. So if the bill does pass in both the Senate, House and the Senate and become law, it would be effective July 1st, 2024, but understand that it would take time for the OEC to implement it.
Yeah, but we have been, believe
Yeah.
me, we've been preparing for this. We've
Oh,
spent
yes.
hours and hours on systems, and our contracts department has been, working on contracts. So we're hoping we can start this ASAP.
Mhm.
And the full implementation, really the totally full implementations in 2027, but in 2025, there would be an RFP, but it would not be an RFP for existing state-funded programs. It would be a RFA, which is a request for application for the existing providers. And then there would be open spaces where if they're new spaces, programs can go through a competitive process to apply for additional spaces. So that's 25 to 27. That would be a 2-year window. And then everything really starts in full in 27. But we did ask to start the payments immediately because we believe programs need stabilization now.
So,
Just,
yeah, go ahead.
I don't have a follow-up on that. I just had 3 comments that I wanted to
Yeah.
mention on air.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the 3 quick comments here in our Q&A. One person is saying it'd be very helpful if in the future, again, the substitutes getting more benefits for their subs for providers and also for staffers. And then there's another comment from a home-based provider saying that it seems that at times OEC is a little uneven when it comes to what they're giving to centers versus home-based. I'm just paraphrasing. And then another comment that's here says, it'd be very helpful to start where did I go? The compensation for, I lost my train of thought. I'll pass it over to Meryl. 2 comments in.
Okay.
There's a QWI question there we could ask.
Well, there's also a question here about Danbury converting school readiness slots over to infant toddler spaces.
We
But-
love that.
But
Programs do that
here's the
now.
challenge is that because it's done on the state fiscal year, it means that that change is happening July 1 instead of September, when a group of preschoolers would be leaving to go to kindergarten. And so there's that 2-month time where they're going to have new infant toddler slots, but not the preschool slots for the kids who are already in preschool waiting to go to kindergarten.
Well, it would seem to me that they could, in their application, say these are going to convert on this date, and that's when the dollars change. So it would reassign the dollars differently. But certainly, I believe the councils have the right to put that in the plan.
I think the issue was that there wasn't a way to do that on the form.
Okay, well, that's important to know. I don't know, is Elena still on? We can just make sure the ECE team knows that. That's a really, these are the things we find out when we add new options. We think that giving infant toddler conversion in school readiness is important. CDC's been doing it for years, but then when we do it, there are things like this that come up. So we should be able to work that out with Dan Barry. I'll make our ECE team aware.
I'm writing it down, Commissioner.
Okay, thanks, Maggie.
Thank you. I think we're about at time for this morning. Is there maybe one last question, Meryl, that you want to make sure gets answered? Or are we good?
Well, I will say on QWI, that we're going to bring people back next week. I do want to say that I have learned that it's not for before and after school. It's just for centers, early childhood centers, and it's not for family childcare. And I'm sorry the family childcare folks feel left out, especially because I misspoke, but understand that it does get complicated when there's a contract. And so I apologize for getting that wrong. And the reason I was so certain is because we really try at OEC to be equitable with family childcare and center-based care. And we really believe that we need to expand family childcare and expand family childcare supports. And we are grateful for the relationship with the union. Even if it complicates things, I think it helps the whole field to have early childhood family childcare providers in Connecticut organized. So we will try to be really clear next week, bring your qualified workforce incentive questions there, and also, concerns. So this makes me want to go back and say, is there any way around that problem? So I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, go ahead, Meryl.
Earlier, there was a question that I'm not seeing anymore about an update on the regulations changes. And then there's a sort of another question that's kind of related to regulations, which has to do with, where did it go? That they'd had an influx of 17 and 18-year-olds who had their first aid and CPR classes because they were babysitters who were now applying for jobs in centers, and wondering whether there was we're thinking about any age change for them.
I don't know about that second piece, but I do know on the regulations, because I asked this last week, because programs are trying to plan, if the 5-to-1 comes in, or if the after school goes to 15-to-1. So I'm getting briefed Friday. So I can offer that on Monday. We'll just give a brief update on where those are. We're moving as fast as we can, but it's not a fast process. And I know programs are waiting anxiously. And I probably had 3 emails in the past month from providers saying, we're trying to plan, we're trying to do this and that. So we will put a message out to the field through the licensed email in the next 2 weeks too, so people know a projected timeline of where things are and when they'll be through.
Another quick one, because I think you already gave the answer, is Elevate. You don't have to do Elevate in order to qualify as a provider. You don't have to do Elevate. It's not mandatory, right? Because there's questions here about,
voluntary.
Do I have to do Elevate? Is it mandatory?
It's voluntary. However, like if you're licensed, you are at, you qualify in essence, because what we're trying to say in Connecticut is we're not making a rating system. We believe that our license programs are safe and are working toward high quality. And so we didn't, we're not saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're saying member plus, member accredited, to try to let families know that each has value. So just being licensed, you are in the first level. Maggie, you want to say something before I leave?
Yes, if you could send me the questions that directly relate to the QWI, then I can organize them, get them over to the team so that they're prepared for next week and can come back, fully prepared to answer every question.
We'll definitely do that. I will send you, I'm actually going to send you all the complete list of questions, because I'm sure there's others that were in there that could be useful in some other way. Next week, we will have OEC back on to talk about Elevate and the provider portal. And so I hope this was sort of part 1.
Yeah, we'll be back.
Conversation,
Exactly.
and then we'll have the second half next week. Commissioner, I know you have to go meet with the governor. Thank you so much.
I do. We're announcing
And-
universal nurse home visiting, so it's very exciting. This is, families need support early, and I think providers benefit if parents get that support early. So great to talk to everyone. Have a great
Great.
day.
Thanks so much. All right, Meryl and Ava, I'm going to turn it over to you to give any legislative updates and talk about Advocacy Day coming up on Thursday.
Maggie's got her hand up, too.
I think that was just I think she just didn't lower it. I think we're good.
Okay, all
I
right.
want that. Thank you.
Okay, so this Thursday, the Alliance is holding an advocacy day at the Capitol. We know that there are several bills that are still waiting to get voted on. They include 5051, they include 5002, they include the incubator bill, and a bill that would make it possible for OEC to implement some changes in care for kids that we would all like to see, without having to go through a year, many years long regulatory process. So those are all still waiting to be brought up for a vote. We've heard that 5002 will come up Wednesday or Thursday. The Alliance Advocacy Day is on Thursday. We'll have an Alliance meeting at the Women's League in Hartford at 9 o'clock, and then we'll head over to the Capitol for 10:30. Vanessa, if you're on, if you can throw the link in for anybody who wants
already.
to RSVP.
It's in there.
It's there, okay. We'll have t-shirts and lunch, and want to make sure that we get as many people up talking to legislators as possible about the various bills.
Meryl, to clarify, it's 10:30 to 1?
10:30 to 1, yeah. And obviously anybody who's, wants to come up in the afternoon, we don't know exactly when they'll go into session. Sometimes it's 11 o'clock, sometimes it's noon. We are into the last full week of the session, but they are not having, they're not in session today, which was one of the days they'd held for session. That not doing a budget makes this a weird year. And tomorrow will be the consensus revenue projections that will give legislators some sense of how much money there is, and what's possible, sort of around the edges of the budget. And so they're primarily talking about reappropriating or reallocating ARPA funds that aren't being used for the things they were originally being proposed to be used for. So, and then in 5051 will happen after the quote budget or the ARPA money gets dealt with. And we'll be in that final crush of the session when the House and the Senate both have passed their own bills. And then the question of sort of the game of chicken as to which chamber takes up the other chamber's bills first, and how much can we get done in that compressed last few days before the end of the session.
Session ends May 8th, just
Yep.
for your
Next
knowledge.
week from Wednesday.
Yep. All right, thanks, Meryl. Ava, did you have any announcements to make?
Announcement, but just to tag on here, more information to Meryl's Day of Advocacy. That day is also projected for 5002, the bill on the Early Childhood Fund, to be voted on the House floor. So I just want to, additional plug that please make time if you can to physically be there, because in addition to meeting Meryl, for those who might have not met Meryl in person, and the other Alliance members, and potentially being an Alliance member, which is awesome, you have an opportunity in live time to advocate for a bill that we've worked so hard on to pass this year. So please come on down. Additional announcements, just a reminder that save the date once more. May 13th is the National Day of Action for early care and early care funding, the Day Without Childcare National Action. We do hope to have here on an Early Care Connection call, because it happens to be a Monday, legislators on. So we have confirmed Johanna Hayes, We also seem to have almost a confirmation from Senator Murphy and Senator Blumenthal. We're just trying to figure out logistics if we're going to do it on this call or an in-person event. But please add it on your calendar so you can make a social media post, share with friends and family the importance of funding in early care and education.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that's it. Is that it? We've had a lot of folks on here today. It's really nice to be with you all. Thank you again for everything you're all doing for the state, for our sector. Tons and tons of you put in letters last week. I don't know if you want to share that link one more time, Ava, but sending letters to the governor requesting more funding and more support for our industry. We have over 400 letters that have been sent in since last week, so that's incredible. And if you haven't had a chance to do that yet, we will stick the link into the chat before we go, and it really does take just 1 minute to do. So it's a small action, but you know, cumulatively, the big group of us doing it all together does speak loudly. All right, I think that's it. I will keep this open just for 1 minute for Ava to have a chance to put that in, and then we'll hang up. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great week.
And remember that next Monday we'll have Deb Fliss and I think Kristen on talking about Elevate. Chance to get all your questions answered about Elevate and qualified.
And the portal.
Yeah.
And the provider portal. Yep.
Yeah. And the qualified workforce enhancements.
Yeah. All right. So those links are now in the chat. You can click it and take 1 minute to do that if you haven't done it. If you've done it, you know, don't do it again. But if you haven't, go for it. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.